Anna Delvey is dancing with the stars, competing on national television. The news is saying she applied for asylum, which is absolutely impossible. What the heck is going on here? She should have already been deported. Let me tell you what I think is happening. Firstly, Anna is an aggravated felon under the immigration laws. She has been convicted of a fraud offense in excess of $10,000. That makes her an aggravated felon. She has been convicted of a theft offense in which she spent more than 1 year in jail. Also makes her an aggravated felon. So she has multiple aggravated felonies. When you overstay on your ESTA, you're supposed to be automatically deported. You don't get to see a judge, and you don't have a right to file for asylum. After she was released from prison, immigration should have deported her immediately, but released her, stupidly, because immigration should never have released her if they were following the law. When they realized they made a mistake, they rearrested her and put her in immigration detention to deport her as somebody who overstayed on their ESTA. But now they couldn't deport her because she appealed her criminal conviction. And if you appeal your criminal conviction, you do not have a final conviction for deportation purposes. So without a final conviction, the government can't say she's been convicted of anything because her case is on appeal, and it could be on appeal for years. And immigration detention is not a punishment. Detention in immigration under the law is to hold somebody for purposes of deporting them. But you can't hold somebody indefinitely in immigration law if they are not deportable, or in this case, don't even have a final conviction because her case is on appeal. So at some point, there was an appellate judge who decided to release her under the law properly and gave her a bond and an ankle bracelet so they can follow her around the country and make sure she doesn't abscond, which is why you see her dancing with the stars with an ankle bracelet. And when you are released from detention, in this situation, you're entitled to get a work permit to be able to support yourself, which is why she's able to go work on television and dance. The news is saying she applied for asylum because Germany's going to deport her back to Russia. But how can you be deported back to Russia if you're a German citizen? That makes no sense. As an aggravated felon who overstayed on their ESTA, she can only apply for two things: withholding of removal or CAT, Convention Against Torture. And CAT and withholding of removal is different than asylum. Asylum means you have a well-founded fear of persecution if you go back to Germany, if you're a German citizen, or Russia if you're a Russian citizen. And with asylum, you could ultimately apply for a green card. Withholding of removal is a lower standard, that there's a probability that you can be harmed if you go back home to Germany or Russia, depending on what her real citizenship is. And with withholding of removal, you don't get an opportunity to get a green card. You just get to live in the United States indefinitely with a work permit because the government's not going to send you home to get killed. And she could apply for a Convention Against Torture, which is a treaty signed by the United States with other United Nations countries that no state will deport somebody to another country or state who would be tortured. But she probably hasn't even gotten yet to the point of filing for withholding of removal or Convention Against Torture because she doesn't have a final conviction. If she were to lose her criminal appeal, now she would have a final conviction and be eligible for deportation. And then her lawyers would have to file for withholding of removal or Convention Against Torture. If in fact she's a citizen of Germany, they're not going to deport her back to Russia. She's a citizen of Germany. That CAT claim and that withholding of removal most likely would be denied, and ultimately she would get deported. So in the end, assuming that she does not win her criminal appeal, she will have a final conviction. And if she's a citizen of Germany, which is what most people believe, she'll be deported back to Germany because there's no CAT claim or withholding that the German government's going to torture her. So she's really just buying time until the criminal conviction is ultimately sustained on appeal. Then it's, I guess, bye-bye, Anna.